The Devil's Due. A Tale of Darkness and Redemption. Sir Alaric was a young knight in a grand kingdom. He wore shining armor and rode a strong horse. People admired him for his bravery in battles. But inside, Alaric felt heavy sadness. He had a secret that he kept hidden from everyone. A long time ago, in a fierce fight, Alaric had betrayed his friend, Sir Cedric. They were fighting against a terrible enemy together. When Cedric was in danger, Alaric made a choice. He ran away instead of helping Cedric. Because of his fear, Cedric was captured and killed. Alaric could never forget that moment. It haunted him every day. Now, Alaric wanted to prove he was a good knight. He hoped that by doing brave deeds he could wash away his guilt. He took on every challenge, hoping to find a way to redeem himself. But no matter how hard he tried, the shadow of his past followed him like a dark cloud. Alaric heard stories about a killer called the Shadow Mage. This killer left strange messages and took lives in cruel ways. The kingdom was scared, and the king ordered that the Shadow Mage be found. Alaric saw this as his chance to make up for his past. If he could catch the killer, maybe he could finally feel like a true knight again. But little did he know, the hunt would lead him into a terrifying game that would test not only his courage, but also his very soul. As Alaric began his search for the Shadow Mage, he rode through the kingdom. The towns were quiet, and the people looked worried. They whispered about the killer, and Alaric felt their fear. He knew he had to act quickly. One night, Alaric found a strange message written on the wall of a tavern. It read, "Fear not the dark, it is your past that hunts you." The words made Alaric shiver. He felt like the message was meant for him. Who could know his secret? He looked around but saw no one watching. He decided he needed to be careful. The next day, Alaric met Lady Elowen. She was a smart and brave investigator. She wanted to catch the Shadow Mage too. Elowen asked Alaric to join her. They could work together. At first, Alaric was happy to have a partner. But soon, he noticed that Elowen watched him closely. It was like she was trying to read his mind. As they traveled together, they followed clues. They visited dark forests and empty castles. Each night, Alaric felt more nervous. What if Elowen found out about his past? He tried to act brave, but the fear grew inside him. One evening, as they camped near a river, Alaric couldn't sleep. He listened to the sounds of the night. The rustling leaves, the croaking frogs, then he heard a soft voice nearby. It was Elowen. She was talking to herself, muttering about the killer. "I must find the truth," she said. "Someone close to the Shadow Mage is hiding something." Alaric's heart raced. Was she talking about him? The next day, they found another message left by the Shadow Mage. "You cannot escape your sins." Alaric felt cold sweat on his forehead. He wanted to scream but stayed silent. He had to keep his secret safe. As the days passed, Elowen grew more suspicious. She asked questions about his past, about his battles. Alaric gave short answers, but he could see her eyes searching for more. He knew he had to stay one step ahead of her. Each time they discovered a new clue, Alaric felt trapped. The more he tried to hide, the closer Elowen came to the truth. She began to connect the dots, and Alaric could sense it. The pressure was building, and he knew he had to act before it was too late. With every night that passed, Alaric felt the Shadow Mage's presence growing stronger. But the real danger was not just the killer. Lurking in the shadows, it was Lady Elowen, who was getting closer and closer to uncovering his dark secret. As Alaric and Elowen continued their search, Alaric felt the weight of his secret growing heavier. Every time Elowen looked at him, he feared she could see his guilt written on his face. He needed a plan to keep her from discovering the truth about his past. One night, while they were camping in a quiet glade, Alaric decided to distract Elowen. He suggested they investigate a nearby village that had been attacked by the Shadow Mage. "Maybe we can find clues there," he said, trying to sound enthusiastic. Elowen agreed, and they packed their things early the next morning. As they rode toward the village, Alaric thought of ways to keep Elowen busy. When they arrived, the village looked empty and sad. The buildings were damaged, and the villagers were scared. Alaric pretended to focus on gathering information. He spoke to the villagers, asking them about the attacks, while keeping Elowen occupied with questions. But Elowen was sharp. She noticed Alaric's nervousness. "Are you all right, Sir Alaric?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "You seem distracted." Alaric forced a smile. "I am fine, just thinking about the Shadow Mage." He hoped his words would calm her suspicions. After gathering some information, they found a clue. A torn piece of cloth with strange symbols. Alaric's heart raced. He recognized the symbols as part of dark magic. This discovery made him uneasy, but it was also a chance. "We should find a wizard," Alaric suggested. "Maybe they can help us understand these symbols." Elowen agreed, and they set off toward a nearby town known for its wise wizard. On their journey, Alaric kept thinking about how to stay ahead of Elowin. If they reached the wizard, she might ask questions he couldn't answer. So he decided to make a detour. "There's a shortcut through the forest," he said. "It will save us time." Elowin trusted him and followed, unaware of his real intentions. As they moved through the dense trees, Alaric's mind raced. He needed to create a distraction. Suddenly, he spotted a cave in the distance. "Let's check that cave," he said, pointing. "Maybe the shadow mage hid something there." Elowin hesitated but finally agreed. Inside the cave, it was dark and cold. Alaric looked around, trying to find anything that could help him, but then he heard Elowin's voice. "Alaric, look at this." She had found more strange symbols on the cave walls. Alaric's heart sank. The symbols were ancient and powerful, tied to dark magic. This was a danger he had not expected. He quickly thought of a plan. "Elowin, we need to leave. This place feels wrong," he said, trying to sound urgent. Elowin frowned but nodded. They turned to leave, but just as they reached the entrance, Alaric heard a noise behind them. It was a low growl, and the shadows shifted. A creature, twisted and dark, emerged from the cave. Alaric felt fear grip him. "Run!" he shouted, pushing Elowin forward. They ran through the trees, heart pounding, the creature chasing them. Alaric glanced back and saw the creature was gaining on them. They burst out of the forest, reaching a narrow path. Alaric led Elowin down the road, hoping to escape. But he could feel the pressure of her gaze. She was beginning to doubt him. He had to keep her close while keeping his secret hidden. After what felt like hours, they finally lost the creature. They stopped to catch their breath. Alaric could see Elowin was shaken. "What was that?" she asked. Trying to regain her composure, Alaric forced himself to think fast. "Just a wild animal. We should stick together," he said, hiding his own fear. But deep inside, Alaric knew he was not just evading a creature. He was also evading the truth, and he could feel it closing in on him. Like the shadows of the forest, every step he took to protect his secret only brought him closer to danger. The hunt was becoming more complicated, and he was running out of time. After their narrow escape from the dark creature, Alaric and Elowin decided to rest in a small village. The villagers were kind and offered them food and shelter. As they ate a simple meal, Alaric noticed Elowin watching him closely again. She seemed to have many questions. That night, as they prepared to sleep, Elowin spoke up. "Alaric, I feel like something is off. You seem more worried lately. Are you hiding something?" Alaric's heart raced. He needed to keep her from discovering his secret, but he also wanted to keep her trust. "I am just tired," he said, trying to sound calm. "The hunt for the shadow mage is hard on all of us." Elowin nodded, but Alaric could see doubt in her eyes. The next morning, Alaric woke up with a plan. He remembered that Elowin had mentioned a gathering of knights in a nearby town. They were discussing the shadow mage and trying to catch him. This could be the perfect trap to draw out the killer. Alaric decided they should go there. When they arrived at the town, it was bustling with activity. Knights were gathered, sharing stories and strategies. Alaric and Elowin joined the group, and he listened carefully. He noticed that some knights were talking about a mysterious figure who appeared at night, spreading fear. "We need to set a trap for the shadow mage," one knight suggested. "If we make it look like we're leaving the town unprotected, he may strike again." Alaric felt a chill run down his spine. This was exactly what he needed. Alaric quickly spoke up. "I can help. I know how to track him. We can create a false camp outside the town to lure him in." The knights agreed, and they started to prepare the trap. Alaric felt a mix of excitement and fear. This was his chance to catch the killer, but it also put him in more danger. As night fell, they set up the fake camp. Alaric helped build a fire and arrange the tents to make it look like many knights were resting. He could feel Elowin's eyes on him as they worked. She seemed to sense his nervousness but said nothing. They waited, sitting in silence, watching the shadows grow longer. Hours passed, and Alaric's heart pounded in his chest. Would the shadow mage take the bait? He glanced at Elowin, who looked determined and ready. Suddenly, they heard a rustling noise in the bushes nearby. Alaric's heart raced. "Get ready," he whispered to the other knights. They grabbed their weapons, ready to fight. The rustling grew louder, and the tension filled the air. Then, from the darkness, a figure stepped into the firelight. It was not the shadow mage, but a frightened villager. "Please, help, the shadow mage is coming," he shouted, panic in his voice. Alaric felt a wave of fear wash over him. Just then, a chilling laugh echoed through the night. "You think you can trap me so easily," a voice called. Alaric's blood ran cold. It was the shadow mage. He stepped out of the shadows, his dark robes billowing around him. Elowin's eyes widened. This was a trap for him, she exclaimed. Alaric realized they had been outsmarted. The shadow mage had been watching them the whole time. As the shadow mage raised his hands, dark energy began to swirl around him. Alaric felt a strong urge to flee, but he knew he had to stand and fight. "We can't let him get away," he shouted, rallying the knights. The battle began, and the knights charged forward. Alaric fought bravely, but the shadow mage was powerful. Dark magic flew through the air, and chaos erupted around them. Alaric felt fear rising again as he tried to focus. But in the midst of the fight, Alaric caught a glimpse of Eowyn. She was facing the shadow mage, her sword drawn, determination in her eyes. He realized that they had to work together if they were going to defeat him. As the battle raged on, Alaric felt the trap he set start to close in on him. The shadow mage had turned their plan against them. Alaric had to think fast. He knew he had to confront his past and his fears if he wanted to win this fight. The fight with the shadow mage was fierce. Alaric could hear the clash of swords and the crackle of dark magic. He felt the fear inside him grow, but he pushed it away. He had to protect Eowyn and the knights. Alaric remembered the strange symbols they found in the cave. He thought they might help defeat the shadow mage. "Eowyn," he shouted, trying to get her attention, "the symbols, we need to find a way to use them." Eowyn nodded, understanding his urgency. "We need to stop him first, we can't let him escape." She charged forward, attacking the shadow mage with all her strength. Alaric admired her bravery, but he knew they needed a plan. The shadow mage laughed as he dodged Eowyn's blows. "You think you can defeat me? I know your fears, Alaric." His voice echoed in the night, and Alaric felt a chill run down his spine. The mage seemed to know everything about him. Alaric realized that the shadow mage was using his fear against him. He had to fight back, not just with swords but with his mind. He took a deep breath and focused. He needed to anticipate the shadow mage's moves. As the battle continued, Alaric started to watch closely. The shadow mage waved his hands, sending dark energy at the knights. Alaric saw how the mage moved before he attacked. "Eowyn," Alaric shouted, "let's work together, I'll distract him, and you can attack from the side." Eowyn agreed, and they quickly formed a plan. Alaric charged at the shadow mage, waving his sword and shouting, "Come at me, coward!" This made the shadow mage turn his attention to Alaric. Just as the shadow mage focused on him, Eowyn moved silently to the side. With a swift motion, she aimed for the mage's weak spot. Alaric could see it too. If they could strike together, they might have a chance. But the shadow mage was clever. He raised his hand and sent a wave of dark energy toward Alaric. Alaric felt panic rise again. But he held firm. "I will not be afraid," he shouted, raising his sword high. In that moment, Eowyn took her chance. She charged forward, aiming for the shadow mage's back. With all her strength, she struck him hard. The mage stumbled, surprised. "Now, Alaric!" Eowyn cried. Alaric rushed in, using the moment to attack. He struck with his sword. Feeling the power of the symbols they had found, the dark magic crackled around him, but he pushed through. The shadow mage roared in anger. "You think you can defeat me? You are just a boy." His voice was filled with rage. And Alaric felt the fear creeping back. But he thought of Cedric, his fallen friend. He thought of his guilt and the chance to make things right. "No," Alaric shouted, finding his strength. "I am more than my past." With renewed courage he struck again. And this time, the blow hit true. The mage staggered back, losing his grip on the dark magic. Seeing their chance, the other knights rallied around Alaric and Eowyn. They fought together, pushing the shadow mage further back. Alaric felt the weight of his fear lift, replaced by a strong sense of purpose. But just as they seemed to gain the upper hand, the shadow mage raised his hands one last time. Dark energy swirled around him. "Stronger than before, you think you have won? This is just the beginning," he shouted, his voice echoing like thunder. Alaric and Eowyn braced themselves for a final attack, knowing they had to finish this battle. The shadow mage was powerful, but they had something stronger: hope and teamwork. Together, they would fight until the end. As the shadow mage gathered his dark energy, the air crackled with tension. Alaric and Eowyn stood ready, swords raised, prepared for the final battle. But just then, a figure stepped out from the shadows behind the mage. It was a young woman with bright eyes and wild hair. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice strong and clear. The knights and Eowyn turned, confused. "Who are you?" Alaric asked, his sword still pointed at the shadow mage. The young woman smiled. "I am Kellen. I was once the apprentice of the shadow mage, but I left him. I know his secrets." Alaric felt a rush of hope. Maybe she could help them. Kellen stepped closer. "The shadow mage is powerful, but he also has a weakness. I can help you defeat him, but you must trust me." The shadow mage laughed. "You think she can help? She is weak. She left me because she could not handle my power." Kellen glared at him. "I left you because I saw the darkness you create. I will not help you anymore." Alaric felt uncertain. "Why should we trust you?" he asked. Kellen nodded, understanding his fear. "I know how to break his spell. If we work together, we can end this." Eowyn spoke up. "What do we need to do?" Kellen looked at the shadow mage, who was starting to regain his strength. We need to distract him. While you fight him, I will use the symbols from the cave. They can weaken his magic. Alaric agreed. Let's do it. We have to work quickly. He turned to the knights. Get ready to fight. We need to buy Kellen time. The knights nodded, and they charged at the shadow mage again. Alaric felt his heart race. This was their chance. He and Elowin attacked together, keeping the mage focused on them. Kellen moved quietly, drawing the symbols in the dirt with a piece of chalk. She chanted softly, her voice steady and clear. Alaric could see the energy swirling around her, and he hoped it would be enough. As the battle raged on, the shadow mage tried to fight back. He sent blasts of dark energy toward Alaric and Elowin. But they dodged and struck again. Keep going, Kellen shouted. We're almost there. Suddenly, the shadow mage turned his attention to Kellen. You dare to betray me, he yelled, furious. I will destroy you. Alaric felt a surge of fear. Kellen, hurry, he shouted, but Kellen remained calm. She continued her chant. And the symbols began to glow with light. The shadow mage's power seemed to weaken. With one final push, Alaric and Elowin attacked at the same time. They struck the shadow mage, and he staggered back. His dark magic flickering, Kellen finished her chant and a bright light filled the cave. Now, Kellen shouted. Together, strike him down. Alaric and Elowin charged forward, and with a powerful blow, they hit the shadow mage one last time. The dark energy exploded around them, and the shadow mage let out a terrible scream. In that moment, everything changed. The dark clouds above them parted, and the stars shone bright in the sky. Alaric felt a wave of relief wash over him. They had done it. But as the dust settled, Alaric noticed something strange. Kellen was standing alone, her expression serious. What's wrong? He asked, confused. Kellen's eyes narrowed. I warned you about the shadow mage, but I didn't tell you everything. I was his apprentice for a reason. I have dark magic inside me, too. Alaric felt his heart sink. What do you mean? Kellen took a deep breath. When we defeated him, his magic transferred to me. I can feel it growing stronger. Elowin stepped forward, alarmed. You need to control it. We can help you. But Kellen shook her head. I don't know if I can. The darkness is powerful. I may become the next shadow mage. Alaric and Elowin exchanged worried glances. They had fought to defeat one darkness, but now they faced another. Could they save Kellen, or would she become the enemy they just defeated? The fate of the kingdom hung in the balance once again. The air was thick with tension. Alaric, Elowin, and Kellen stood together, but now their friendship felt fragile. Kellen's eyes sparkled with dark magic, and Alaric could see the struggle within her. Kellen, we can help you control it, Elowin urged, stepping closer. You don't have to let the darkness win. Kellen shook her head, her expression torn. I don't know if I can fight it. The shadow mage's magic is strong. I can feel it taking over. Alaric stepped forward, determined. You are not alone, Kellen. We are with you. We fought the shadow mage together, and we can fight this darkness too. Suddenly, Kellen's face twisted in pain. No, you don't understand. Her voice was stronger now, filled with anger. The magic is calling to me. It wants to take control. The ground beneath them trembled, and dark energy began to swirl around Kellen. Alaric and Elowin stood their ground, ready to protect her. Kellen, listen to me, Alaric shouted. You are stronger than this. You chose to leave the shadow mage. You can choose again. Kellen's eyes flickered between light and darkness. But what if I become like him? What if I hurt you? She looked at Elowin, fear in her eyes. You won't, Elowin said firmly. You have us. We will not let you fall. With a roar, Kellen thrust her hands forward and dark energy shot out. Alaric quickly raised his sword, blocking the blast. The force pushed him back, but he held on. You can control it, Kellen. Focus on us. Kellen hesitated, and the dark energy around her flickered. I don't want to hurt you, she cried, tears streaming down her face. Then fight it, Alaric urged. Remember who you are. You are not the shadow mage. You are Kellen. With a deep breath, Kellen closed her eyes. The dark energy around her swirled violently, but she began to chant softly. The words came from deep within her, a light breaking through the darkness. I am not the shadow mage. I am Kellen. Alaric and Elowin watched in awe as the dark magic started to weaken. The swirling shadows began to fade, replaced by a soft glow. Yes, you can do it, Elowin cheered. But just as Kellen seemed to gain control, a final surge of dark energy erupted. No, she screamed, as it threatened to pull her back in. Hold on, Kellen, Alaric shouted. He rushed to her side, grabbing her hand. Elowin joined them, holding Kellen's other hand. Together, they formed a circle of support. Fight with us, Elowin encouraged. We are stronger together. Kellen opened her eyes, filled with determination. I will not let the darkness win, she cried, with one powerful shout. She pushed against the dark energy. The light around them grew brighter, pushing back the shadows. The dark energy roared in anger, but Kellen stood firm. The force began to collapse in on itself. And with a final burst, the darkness exploded into a million tiny sparks, lighting up the night. Alaric, Elowen, and Kellen fell to the ground, breathing heavily. They had defeated the darkness. But it had been a hard battle. Kellen looked at her friends, relief washing over her. "I did it, I fought it." "Yes, you did," Alaric smiled, helping her to her feet. "You are strong, Kellen. We knew you could do it." Elowen hugged Kellen tightly. "We are proud of you. You are not alone anymore." But even as they celebrated, a shadow passed over Alaric's heart. He knew that the Shadow Mage had been defeated, but darkness could always return. They had won this battle, but the fight against evil would never truly end. Together, they would have to stay strong, ready for whatever came next. As the light from the dark energy faded, Alaric, Elowen, and Kellen stood together, feeling relieved. But soon they noticed something strange. The ground beneath them began to shake, and the sky darkened again. "What's happening?" Elowen asked, panic in her voice. Alaric looked around. Realizing the Shadow Mage's magic was not completely gone, "We need to leave this place," he shouted. But just then, the Shadow Mage's voice echoed through the air, colder than before. "You may have won this battle, but I am not finished yet." Dark shadows rose from the ground, forming a swirling vortex. Kellen gasped. "He is trying to come back." She felt a pull towards the dark energy. "No, I won't let him." Alaric took a step forward, his heart racing. "Kellen, we need to find a way to stop this." But then he remembered something. "The magic, it's connected to you." Kellen's eyes widened. "Yes, if I can absorb the magic, I can stop him for good. But it will take everything from me." "What do you mean?" Elowen asked, fear creeping into her voice. "You can't." "I have to," Kellen replied, her voice steady. "If I don't, the Shadow Mage will return, and many will suffer." "No," Alaric shouted, stepping closer. "We can find another way." Kellen shook her head. "This is the only way. I can feel the darkness calling to me. If I don't do this now, it will take over completely." Alaric felt his heart sink. "But we can't lose you. You fought so hard." Kellen smiled softly. "I know, but sometimes we must make sacrifices for the greater good. I won't let this evil come back. I won't let you down." Elowen grabbed Kellen's hands. "Please, don't do this. We can think of something else." But Kellen looked into their eyes, determination shining through. "Trust me, I can do this. I need you both to promise me that you will be strong." With tears in her eyes, Elowen nodded. "I promise." Alaric swallowed hard. "I promise too." Kellen took a deep breath and stepped toward the swirling dark energy. "I will do this for you, for the kingdom, and for everyone I love." As she reached out her hands, the shadows began to swirl around her, wrapping her in darkness. Alaric and Elowen watched, feeling helpless. "Stay strong, Kellen," Alaric called out. Kellen's face was serious as the dark energy surrounded her. "I will fight this. I am more than the Shadow Mage," she shouted. The shadows twisted and turned, trying to pull her in. With all her strength, Kellen pushed against the dark energy. A bright light began to glow from within her, battling the shadows. "I choose light, I choose to protect," she cried. The vortex roared in anger, but Kellen stood firm. Alaric and Elowen could see the struggle, and they held hands tightly, wishing for her strength. Then, with one final burst, Kellen channeled all her energy into the darkness. A blinding light erupted, filling the air. The dark magic exploded around them, and Alaric and Elowen shielded their eyes. When the light faded, silence filled the air. Alaric slowly opened his eyes. He looked around but saw no sign of Kellen. "Kellen," he shouted, panic rising in his chest. Elowen looked around frantically. "Where is she?" But deep down, they both felt the truth. Kellen had sacrificed herself to stop the Shadow Mage forever. Tears filled Alaric's eyes. "She saved us. She saved everyone," he whispered, heartbreak sinking in. Elowen put a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We have to honor her sacrifice. We will make sure her light lives on." Together, they left the place where the battle had taken place, knowing they had lost a dear friend, but also knowing they had stopped great evil. They vowed to carry Kellen's spirit with them, promising to fight for the light she had chosen. As Alaric and Elowen walked away from the battle site, the night sky was clear again. The stars shone brightly. But the sadness in their hearts felt heavy. They had lost Kellen, but her bravery still burned within them. "Where do we go now?" Elowen asked, her voice soft. Alaric looked up at the stars. "We go back to the kingdom. We need to tell everyone what happened. They need to know Kellen saved us." As they traveled, they talked about Kellen's strength and courage. "She fought so hard," Elowen said. "I wish she could see how much we admired her." Alaric nodded, his heart aching. "We will make sure everyone knows her story. We cannot let her sacrifice be forgotten." When they reached the kingdom, the townspeople gathered around them. They were worried and scared, but Alaric and Elowen stood tall. "We have defeated the Shadow Mage," Alaric shouted, "but we lost a brave friend, Kellen. She sacrificed herself to save us all." The crowd gasped, and silence fell. Eowyn spoke next. Kellen showed us what true strength is. We must honor her memory and keep fighting for the light. The townspeople nodded, their faces filled with respect and sadness. They lit candles in memory of Kellen, and the warm glow filled the night. But as the days passed, Alaric and Eowyn noticed strange things happening. Shadows moved in the corners of their eyes, and whispers filled the air at night. It felt as if the darkness was not truly gone. One evening, Alaric sat outside, looking at the stars. He felt a chill. What if the Shadow Mage finds a way back? He wondered. Eowyn joined him, her face serious. We must stay alert. Darkness can return, but we will be ready. Then they heard a soft rustling in the bushes. Alaric's heart raced. Did you hear that? He asked. Eowyn nodded, eyes wide. They both stood, ready for anything. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was cloaked in darkness, but as it stepped into the light, they could see it was a woman. She had wild hair and bright eyes. It looked like Kellen, but something was different. Kellen? Alaric whispered, hope and fear mixing in his heart. The woman smiled, but it was a strange smile. I have come back, she said softly. Is it really you? Eowyn asked, stepping closer. The woman nodded. I am Kellen, but I am also something more. The darkness tried to take me, but I fought. I am here to help. Alaric felt a mix of relief and worry. But you were gone. How can you be here now? Kaelin's expression changed. I am changed. The magic is still with me. I need your help to control it. Eowyn glanced at Alaric, her heart pounding. What does this mean? Kellen stepped closer, her eyes shining with power. The darkness is not defeated. It waits, watching. We must unite to keep it at bay. Alaric took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their journey ahead. Together, we can fight, but we must be careful. The darkness is strong. Kellen nodded, determination in her eyes. And I will not let it win. We can find a way to keep the light alive. As they stood together, the stars twinkling above, the three of them knew they were beginning a new journey. The battle was not over, but they were ready to face whatever came next. With hope in their hearts and strength in their bonds, they prepared to protect their kingdom. From the shadows that lingered, the story was far from finished, and they would fight to the end.